Okay, got it. Yeah, so I was very happy to receive this invitation to talk about this subject because it's one of my favorite subjects. It's something I can talk about with a lot of joy and energy. And I also feel it's very important at this time, at this stage. Um, I'm staying at Shrivasti Abbey in Washington State, and we just finished our winter retreat. Every winter we do retreat for 3 months. We just finished last Friday, and so during the 3 month retreat, we're mainly silent. We do a little bit of talking, but not much. And most of us don't read the news, but a few people were reading the news, and so they knew about the war in Ukraine. And I still haven't gotten up the courage to start reading about that, but I'm aware of roughly what's been happening, and of course, very sad about that. And my understanding is many people in the world are very troubled by what is happening. I mean, how can you not be troubled when ordinary people, innocent people, including children and elderly people and mothers and yeah, people who are not soldiers, innocent civilians are being killed and in horrible ways. So that may be the case with some of you. Some of you may be feeling sad and distressed. And I mean, one thing that sometimes happens is we feel compassion. You know, we are very concerned about what's going on and would like it to stop. And you know, it's like unbearable to hear or to see the images of what's happening, and we feel like we want to do something, but there's not much we can do. Even the people who are in positions of power, like presidents and prime ministers and so on, they would like to stop the war, but even they are not able to make that happen. And so then we can kind of get caught up in these feelings of sadness and distress, and that's not very helpful. It's not helpful for ourselves, not helpful for our health, physical health, our mental health, and so on. And it's certainly not helping anyone else either. And so in Buddhism, there's many methods we can use to stop our mind from getting caught up in unhelpful feelings and even negative feelings, and instead generate positive thoughts, positive feelings, positive energy. And of course we can then radiate that energy, send that energy out to others, which is much more helpful for others, but also helpful for ourselves, for our own body and mind. And so what we're going to be looking at in these series of talks are some of those methods: how to have more love, more compassion, more joy, more equanimity. So these are positive mental states. We have them already. We already have these thoughts, these feelings in our mind, but we can learn to sort of tap into them and grow them, cultivate them in the same way that we grow things in our garden. And in that way, these positive states of mind will be more prevalent in our experience. We'll be able to have them more often and build them up so they're even stronger. So, so as we go through these series of talks, hopefully you will learn how to keep your mind more positive and not negative. So what I thought to do is start each talk with just a few minutes of sitting quietly to settle down our body and our mind, and also to generate a positive motivation, an altruistic motivation for what we're doing. So this is something that Tibetan lamas emphasize very much. You've probably heard it before, the importance of having a positive motivation for the things that we do, because the motivation is a very important factor determining the direction of our energy, where our energy will go, what kind of consequences will come from the actions that we do. So we're advised to always try to have a positive motivation, an altruistic motivation for the things that we do. And in that way, the things that we do will bring the greatest amount of benefit to ourselves and to others. So let's take a few minutes to do that. So make yourselves comfortable, as comfortable as you can. Let your awareness come into your body, right here, where you are, where you're sitting right now. Feel your body. If you notice any tension anywhere in your body, maybe in your shoulders or in your stomach or your back or anywhere in your body, try your best to release the tension. Let it go. You can imagine that it melts and then flows out of you, goes down into the earth below, or just disappears in space, whatever method works best for you. But just try to let go of that tension as much as you can. And now be aware of your breathing, the breath flowing in and out. And let the rhythm of the breathing be natural. Don't try to control it in any way. Just let your body breathe as it normally does. And then with your mind, your awareness, pay attention to your breathing. Observe your breathing. Try to be aware of each inhalation of the breath and each exhalation of the breath, as well as any pauses in between. Just keep doing this for one breath after another. If it helps, you can say to yourself something like breathing in, breathing out, and so on. You can count your breaths as well if that's helpful. And if thoughts arise in your mind, just be aware of them, but don't follow them, don't get caught up in them. Thoughts are transitory, like clouds in the sky. They come and they go, they're not permanent. So just let them go and keep returning your attention to breathing. And now look into your mind and ask yourself why you are here, why you are joining this class. What is your reason, your motivation? So motivation is very important. It's the main factor that determines the outcome of whatever we do. If we do something with a negative motivation, wanting to hurt somebody, or just coming from a place of ego, just thinking of ourselves and wanting to increase our own popularity or fame or wealth, then those are not good motivations. Those are negative motivations. We should look out for them and avoid them. And the best motivation we could have for learning the Dharma, spiritual teachings, and practicing the Dharma is altruism, meaning caring about others, caring about all beings if possible, wanting to help, wanting to relieve suffering and the causes of suffering, wanting to bring more peace, happiness, genuine happiness. So if that kind of thought, that kind of motivation sounds right to you, then you can just say to yourself something like, I'm here to listen to this talk so that I can be more helpful not just to myself, but to others, my family, my friends, people in my community, people around the world, as many other people and beings as possible. So you can use your own words for this, but try to at least feel some sense of wanting to learn the Dharma for the benefit of others. So we'll do some more meditation a little later. First, I'd like to do a bit of talking, explaining things. So the title of these talks is the same as the title of a book that I wrote, which is called Awakening the Kind Heart. Published by Wisdom Publications. And there are two parts to the book. The first part explains what are called the 4 immeasurable thoughts. These are 4 very beautiful, positive states of mind that we already do have them to a certain extent. They're things that just are natural parts of our mind, but they're good to develop even more so that we can feel them more and more often. So these 4 immeasurable thoughts are love or loving kindness, compassion, joy or rejoicing, or I think a better term is sympathetic joy or empathetic joy, and then equanimity. And so that's mainly what I'm going to focus on in this series of talks, is those 4 immeasurable thoughts, explaining what they are, how we can develop them, and we'll do some meditations each week to see how we can cultivate these thoughts more. And the second part of the book is about the 8 verses, explanation of the 8 verses of thought transformation. So we won't do that this time, maybe another time. And before I get into the 4 immeasurable thoughts, I don't know if any of you are new to Buddhism. I thought to just give a little background information, basic information about Buddhism, some of the teachings of Buddhism. So what I plan to do is I'll talk for a while and we'll do some meditation. And then at the end, I'll leave some time for questions. So if you have questions, you can bring those up at the end. So Buddhism is quite vast. The Buddha taught for something like 45 years, and the collections of all his teachings, when you put them together in books, they become like a great big stack of books. In the Tibetan tradition, there are 108 volumes, thick volumes, containing the Buddha's teachings. So it's kind of like you could spend your whole life learning the Buddha's teachings. But they're not meant to be just learned like intellectual knowledge. They're meant to be practiced, integrated into our lives. So that's why meditation is very important. Meditation is a way in which we can deeply contemplate what the Buddha taught and bring it more deeply into our minds, and then it becomes our natural way of thinking, our natural way of being and living our life. So when we talk about Buddha, in one sense, we could say Buddha was a person. He lived in India something like 2,500 years ago. He meditated. He attained what we call enlightenment or awakening. That's actually the meaning of the word Buddha. Buddha isn't like a name, it's a term used for somebody who has attained this state of awakening. And it's difficult to really understand what enlightenment is. I mean, you have to be there. You have to attained it yourself to fully understand it. But we can get some idea of it. And actually, my name, the first part of my name, my Tibetan name is Sangye, Sangye Kadra. So Sangye is the Tibetan term for Buddha, which is a little embarrassing, you know. Just because I have that name doesn't mean I'm a Buddha. But it's what I aspire to become. I want to be like a Buddha. So the term Sangye has two syllables. The first one, Sang, means pure. And so that refers to a Buddha being pure or free of all negative things. So all the negative states of mind, like anger and greed and jealousy and ignorance and so on. So within our minds are various delusions or afflictions. And Buddha was once like us. He had delusions in his mind. He had anger and attachment and ignorance and so on. But he found a way to free his mind from these delusions. So his mind is totally pure, totally free of all negative states of mind and all obscurations. So there's a lot to be cleared away, but the Buddha is someone who cleared all those away, and they will never arise again. So once you have eliminated those negative states of mind, they'll never come back. They're gone forever. So Buddha will never get angry, never have ignorance or greed or any of those negative states of mind. The second part of the term is gye, and that means developed or expanded. And that refers to the positive qualities of the mind, like love and compassion and wisdom and courage and patience. So there's all these good qualities that we have in our minds, but in our minds, they're not so well developed. They're there sometimes, but other times they're not. But in the mind of a Buddha, these positive qualities are there all the time, and they're fully developed, fully perfected. So, for example, loving kindness, which is one of these positive qualities we're going to be talking about, in the mind of a Buddha, it's there all the time, nonstop, like 24/7, every minute, every second. The Buddha feels love, and he feels it for everybody, not just for nice people, people who are doing nice things, but even for people who are doing horrible things, like Putin or Hitler, Osama bin Laden, terrorists, murderers, rapists, people who do awful things. We have a hard time feeling love for them. We may even think they don't deserve it. They don't deserve my love. Only nice people deserve to be loved. Buddha doesn't see it that way. Buddha feels love for everybody, every living being. And compassion as well, and all the good qualities. So in the mind of a Buddha, those positive qualities are fully developed, fully perfected, always on, always present. So that gives us some idea of enlightenment. Enlightenment is a state of mind that's free of everything negative, everything that creates suffering and problems and is painful and disturbing. All of that's gone. And then all the good qualities, the beautiful qualities are there all the time, fully developed, fully perfected. So Buddha attained that state. He discovered how it's possible to attain such a state of mind, and that's what his teachings are all about, how to do it, how to transform our minds so that we can have the same experience that the Buddha has. Because we say in Buddhism, or at least in Mahayana Buddhism, we say that everyone has the potential to reach enlightenment. This is what we call Buddha nature. Everybody has Buddha nature. Everybody has the ability, the potential to do what the Buddha did, to reach the state that the Buddha achieved. And so in Mahayana Buddhism, that's our goal. Our goal is to follow in the Buddha's footsteps, become like the Buddha. And it is possible for all of us. Now, that may be hard to believe. Yeah, it's understandable. But at least don't throw it out. Don't reject it. Try to keep an open mind and think, maybe it's true. Maybe it's possible. Let's check it out. And that's, I mean, the Buddha did say that. He said, don't just believe my teachings. Don't just believe what I say, but investigate it for yourself. Use your own intelligence. Think about it. Investigate. Lama Yeshe used to say, check it out. Check it out. That's what we are meant to do, is investigate to see if it's true or not. And so within Buddhism, like I said, Buddha lived 2,500 years ago, and then so that's 25 centuries. And during that time, Buddhism spread. The Buddhist teaching spread throughout India, and then to other Asian countries, and then recently, relatively recently, in the last century, they started spreading to the West, to America and Australia and Canada, Europe, and so on and so forth. So more and more people around the world are finding out about Buddhism. And there's kind of a lot of different schools of Buddhism, like Zen and Theravada Buddhism, and of course Tibetan Buddhism. But mainly there's two traditions. So all the different traditions of Buddhism are part of two main traditions. One is the form of Buddhism you find mainly in Southeast Asia, like Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka, and a few other Southeast Asian countries. And they refer to that form of Buddhism as Theravada, which means the tradition of the elders or the older tradition. And then Mahayana Buddhism, which Mahayana means like the great vehicle or the universal vehicle. And that's the form of Buddhism that spread more in the northern Asian countries like China, Japan, of course, Tibet, Mongolia, Korea. And the main difference between these two traditions is in the goal, what it is one is aiming for, what one wants to achieve. So as I mentioned already, in Mahayana Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism is Mahayana Buddhism. So the goal is enlightenment, becoming a Buddha. And the reason for becoming a Buddha isn't just for our own benefit. Of course, we will benefit if we become enlightened, but the real reason is to benefit others. So the Buddha himself, the reason he worked so hard to reach enlightenment was because of compassion. He had this enormous compassion for living beings, seeing all their suffering and wanting to free them from their suffering, wanting them to be happy. And so motivated by altruism, the wish to help others, he followed the path. He did all the practices to reach enlightenment. And in fact, you can't reach enlightenment if you don't have that as your reason. If you just want to, make yourself happy and free from suffering, with that, if that's your motivation, then you won't be able to reach enlightenment. So you have to have altruism as your motivation in order to get all the way to enlightenment. And so that's why, we are encouraged to always try to have altruism as our motivation for the things that we do, not just listening to the teachings and doing meditation, but even our ordinary activities. like eating and sleeping, working, playing. So we can do all of these things with an altruistic motivation, like eating food. Here at the Abbey, we do a lot of prayers before lunch, and to make sure that we do have a motivation of eating food, not just to enjoy the taste or to have a healthy body, but to have energy to be able to continue our Dharma practice for the attainment of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. So connecting the eating of food with our spiritual practice and our wish to benefit others. So there's ways you can bring that motivation of altruism into all the activities you do in your life. So then the other tradition, Theravada tradition, the main goal there is not Buddhahood, full enlightenment, but nirvana, liberation, liberating oneself, freeing oneself from suffering and the causes of suffering, and attaining the very beautiful, peaceful state of nirvana. So there one doesn't have the aim of wanting to help all living beings. Of course, they don't want to harm others, and they do want to help others as much as possible, but they don't have that aim of becoming enlightened, because it does take a lot of time and energy to go all the way to enlightenment and reach the state that the Buddha reached. So you do have to have a strong determination to do that. So in the Theravada tradition, generally, I say generally because I knew when I lived in Singapore, I knew one monk there from Sri Lanka. He was a teacher, a very wonderful teacher from Sri Lanka. And he told me that in Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka normally is a Theravada country. So people are mainly trying to attain nirvana. But he said there are some monks who take the Bodhisattva vow, who make this vow to reach enlightenment, to attain the state that the Buddha attained. So even though they're wearing the robes of the Theravada tradition, but in their mind and their heart, they actually have the Mahayana attitude. So you can't always tell just by what kind of robes a person is wearing, or what kind of prayers they say, or what kind of Dharma temple they go to. It really depends on what is going on in your mind and your heart. So those are the main differences between those two traditions. But most of their material that is studied and practiced is the same. For example, the importance of ethics, having really, really good ethical conduct, which mainly means not harming others, refraining from killing, stealing, and so on, any kind of action that causes suffering to others. So that's, like the foundation of all the Buddha's teachings and the Buddhist practices, and that's applies to all the traditions of Buddhism. And also overcoming the delusions, the negative aspects of the mind, like anger and so forth. So those need to be subdued and eventually eliminated. And then cultivating the positive qualities, such as love and compassion. So the 4 immeasurable thoughts that I'm going to be teaching you in this course are common to both Mahayana and Theravada traditions. Although in the Theravada tradition, they're usually called something else. They have the term Brahma Vihara is the Sanskrit or Pali term, which translates as divine abodes or divine abidings, something like that, or sublime abodes. So it's the same 4 positive states of mind. In the Tibetan tradition, we call them the 4 immeasurable thoughts, but it's just a different name, but the 4 states themselves are different. So that means all Buddhist followers of all traditions are urged to develop these 4 beautiful qualities, these 4 beautiful states of mind. It's like an essential ingredient in the Buddhist path. And the reason for cultivating these four states of mind, the real reason within the context of Buddhism, is to attain higher states of mind, such as enlightenment or nirvana, and so on. Buddhism explains various levels of realization that can be attained by cultivating these four states of mind. But even if one isn't interested in, I mean, not everybody feels like they want to follow the Buddhist path. They don't maybe accept everything in the Buddhist teachings. But even so, these four states of mind are good for us, even for our own happiness and peace of mind here and now. Without talking about these higher states of mind, but just in our present life, if we can have more love, more compassion, more joy, and more equanimity, we ourselves will be happier and healthier. There's health benefits as well to these positive states of mind. For example, research shows that it strengthens your immune system. If your mind could be more positive, then your immune system will be stronger, which means less likely to get sick. And that's very helpful in this day and age with all the different variants of COVID going around. Have any of you gotten COVID? Any of you had COVID? Not me. Yeah, here in the Abbey, we've managed. Huh? Somebody. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. We're about 20 people here living in quite close proximity to each other, eating together, meditating together, and working together, and so on. But we've managed to keep our environment free of COVID. So then, yeah. So developing these four states of mind is good for us, both right now in our present life, as well as for long term, if we aspire to higher states of mind as described in the Buddhist teachings. And these four states of mind are good for others, as if we can have them in our minds and our hearts in the way we talk to other people and interact with other people, then it brings benefit to them. They'll feel more comfortable, more trusting, more relaxed in our presence, and also for the world. I do really feel that having positive energy in our hearts, sending that energy out, that does have an effect on others. I love the quotation from Gandhi, be the change you want to see in the world. I agree with that 100%. If we want the world to be more peaceful, have less anger, less violence, less harmful behavior, then we need to be that way ourselves. If we ourselves can be an example of that to the best of our ability, then we have a chance of influencing others and influencing the world. But I once met a man who told me that he for 30 years he was involved in different peace groups that were trying to bring about peace in the world. And after 30 years of that, he left. He gave up because he said they don't get along with each other. So the people within these groups, they want peace, but even with themselves, they can't get along. There's no peace. And then between groups, groups were fighting with each other. And so how can you bring about peace in the world if you don't even have peace in your own heart and you can't even get along with the people around you? You can't control your anger, and you're asserting your ego, and so on and so forth. So we have to start with ourselves. And if we can have genuine peace and positive qualities in our own mind and our own heart, then we can benefit others. Okay, so let's see. Yeah, we got 45 minutes left. So in the book, the first chapter of the book is about changing the mind. So I thought to talk about that today. Again, some of you might be relatively new to Buddhism. In Buddhism, we talk a lot about mind. We use the word mind. And in Buddhism, mind is, it's not a physical thing. It's not our brain or any part of our brain or any part of our body. It's a non-material, non-physical phenomena. It's that part of us that thinks and feels and knows and experiences, is aware. And it has many different facets, many different ways that we know things. So like right now, all of us have mind, and our mind is having different experiences. If your eyes are open and you're looking at the screen, you see my image on the screen and the Buddha behind. And maybe you see the faces of the other people. If you look out your window, then you may see your garden or cars passing by. So that experience of seeing, according to Buddhism, is part of our mind. And the same with our other senses. Hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling sensations in our body, hot, cold, hungry, pain, whatever. So all those kinds of experiences are actually our mind, according to Buddhism. It's our mind that has those experiences. And then mind also includes all of our thoughts and our emotions, our sadness, happiness, love, anger, and so on. There's a whole range of different kinds of emotions. So those are all part of mind. Dreams and memories, fantasies, those are also part of our mind. So our mind is very complex, contains many, many different types of experience. And it's not just one thing. We shouldn't think of our mind as like one thing sitting inside of us somewhere, having all these experiences. It's not just one thing. It's compared to a river or a stream in that it's made up of many different parts, different experiences. And each of these experiences in our mind, like our different thoughts and our memories and our feelings and our perceptions, they come and they go, they arise and they pass. This becomes more clear when you meditate, you observe your mind, you can kind of see that happening. Things arise and then pass, they arise and they pass. Nothing in the mind is permanent, fixed, always there, always the same. So it's better to think of the mind as being like a stream or a river made up of all these different mental experiences. And there's a lot more to say about the mind, but I'll focus on those aspects of the mind that are more what we are concerned about in these talks. So among the experiences in the mind, there is some that we can call negative or unskillful, unwise. The term delusion, I like the term delusion because these are aspects of the mind that are deluded. they they don't see things correctly, they see things in a mistaken way, and they lead to suffering, they lead to problems. They cause our mind to be disturbed and unpeaceful. So they include things like anger, hatred, greed, jealousy, arrogance, and ignorance. So there's lots of these. Those are the main ones, but there's lots of more minor ones. And unfortunately, we unenlightened beings, that means, I don't know about you, but I'm definitely unenlightened. I'm not a Buddha. So we have these delusions in our mind, and we don't really have any choice or control over them. They just pop up again and again. So you might be very peaceful at a certain moment in time, just sitting very peacefully, not feeling upset or angry. And then something can happen. Somebody will say something to you, or somebody will do something. Or if you're watching the news or listening to news or reading your emails or whatever, something will trigger your mind to get angry, to feel anger. So just from one moment to the next, you can go from being peaceful and calm to being fiercely angry. Does that ever happen? No. Yeah, we don't like to admit it, but it does happen. It's painful. I mean, I hope you agree with me that that kind of experience is not a pleasant experience. It's very painful, very disturbing. But it happens, and we probably feel regret and shame and, oh, I wish I wasn't like this and things like that. But it does happen. And so this is the situation with us unenlightened beings. And it's because we have seeds in our mind. Within our mind are seeds, just like flower seeds or vegetable seeds that grow in your garden and turn into plants. So we have in our mind seeds left from previous experiences of getting angry and being greedy and being selfish and so on. So we've had those experiences many, many times in the past, and they leave seeds in our mind for the same kind of experience to arise again. So that's why these things come up, even if we don't want them to. We don't want to have these feelings, these experiences, but they come up because the seeds are there. And then just like with seeds in your garden, you put water on the seeds and then poof, they turn into a plant. So when our seeds of delusions get watered by some circumstances in our environment, or even internally, sometimes just remembering something that happened in the past can trigger off anger or another seed of delusion. So it just needs some stimulus, some trigger, and then poof, that pops up, that negative feeling pops up. So some aspects of our mind are like that. They're negative, they're painful, disturbing, and they are the cause of suffering. I mean, the Buddha was concerned about suffering. He wanted himself, of course, he wanted to be free of suffering, but his real goal was to help others be free of suffering, to relieve the suffering of the world. And so he discovered this is where suffering comes from. The root of suffering are these delusions in our mind, like the war in Ukraine. What's driving that? It's delusions in the minds of the Russian government. Probably greed for power and for fame and for territory and who knows what. I don't really know what's going on in Putin's mind, but there are delusions there. And ignorance, maybe some anger, some resentment, what the Ukrainians did in the past. We got to get back at them. So these are things that come up in the minds of human beings and motivate things like war or murder or just saying nasty words to somebody, speaking hurtful words to another person, or telling lies or whatever. So these delusions come up in our mind, they motivate us to act, to speak, to do things, and then we create karma. That karma ripens later on in painful experiences that we will have, but it can also bring immediate painful experiences for ourselves and for others, creating suffering. So this is the main job of somebody following the Buddhist path, is to work on their mind, and we can't just wipe out these delusions all at once, but we work on decreasing them, and eventually it is possible to eliminate them completely so that they never arise again. And then there are these positive qualities, positive states of mind. They include love, compassion, and so on. And we have the seeds of those as well. Thank goodness. Our mind isn't just full of negative seeds, but we have positive seeds, seeds of positive states of mind. And those can be nurtured, nourished, cultivated. Actually, the term for meditation in Tibetan language is gom, which means to familiarize. And so, what we're trying to do in meditation is familiarize ourselves with positive states of mind, beneficial states of mind, like growing these positive states of mind. And the word for meditation in Sanskrit, I've heard, is bhavana, and that has the sense of cultivate. It's the same word for cultivating a garden, cultivating crops, growing crops. But it's not, in meditation, we're not growing flowers and vegetables, we are growing positive qualities in our minds. So that's what we're meant to be doing in meditation, is to generate positive thoughts and feelings, positive states of mind, and like nurturing them, making ourselves familiar with them, getting used to them, getting habituated to them. And that way they grow more and more, stronger and stronger. And eventually that just becomes our normal way of being, our default mode. So then these kind of feelings, these positive feelings, just arise naturally and spontaneously. So that's basically what Buddhism is all about. Those two things: working on the mind to decrease the negative aspects of the mind and increase the positive ones, the positive aspects of the mind. So I've heard the Dalai Lama say that that's the essence of Buddhism. The essence of Buddhism is transforming our mind. And what it means to transform our mind is just that: decreasing the negative and eventually getting rid of all the negative aspects of the mind, increasing the positive, and eventually that's all there is in the mind. Like in the Buddhist mind, there's only positive thoughts and feelings and qualities, nothing negative. So that's kind of like putting Buddhism in a nutshell, making it very sort of simple and concise. So everything in Buddhism, all the different practices that we do, different methods we use, the different teachings we study, it's all for that purpose of bringing about a positive transformation of our mind. And any questions so far? I've been talking for an hour now. Maybe some of you wonder about something I've said.
Go ahead, Matt.
Thanks, Venerable. I had a question about, so there doesn't seem to be a neutral place in the mind. You either have to be actively working for the beneficial positive states of mind, or you end up being involved in the negative states of mind. Is that true in your opinion? Is there always a need to push really hard towards the beneficial and over familiarize even with those states, rather than kind of, because I find myself get kind of lazy, and even though I'm not wanting to be negative, those negative states of mind pop up if I'm not actively developing their counter or their antidote, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Well, there are different kinds of meditation practice, different techniques, different approaches. So I'm not sure I fully understand what you're saying, but there are some methods of meditation where, if I understand correctly, you're not necessarily trying to cultivate love or compassion or wisdom, but instead just observing the mind, just watching whatever's happening in your mind. And you still need to have a kind of discriminating awareness about what states of mind are positive and which ones are negative. So that if, some sexual fantasy comes up, or some fantasy about killing an enemy comes up in your mind, you're able to recognize that is not a helpful state of mind. I'm not going to go down that road. So you have to have that awareness that that state of mind isn't something, well, ideally, if you're a Buddhist practitioner, that's what you would say. I'm not going to let that take over my mind and control my mind. So you would observe that type of thought or inclination and let it go. Yeah. And also with even, well, again, it depends on what kind of practice you're doing. For example, in the cultivation of calm abiding, or shamatha, as it's taught in the Tibetan tradition, you have some object that you're focusing on, a focal object, which could be the breath or it could be an image of the Buddha, but you have to have some object you're focusing on. And then you train your mind to stay with that object, and you don't let your mind do anything else, think about anything else, or go down any other road. So you just train your concentration on that one object. So when you're doing that kind of practice, it's said that even if a virtuous thought comes up in your mind, like you might think of your teacher, your spiritual teacher, and start feeling all this this joy and this devotion to your spiritual teacher. But you shouldn't let your mind think that way, because that's a distraction from your meditation object. Yeah. So you have to notice that thought, but then let it go and come back to your meditation object. That doesn't mean that thinking about your teacher with joy and faith is something wrong, but it's just a hindrance to the aim of that particular kind of practice. So kind of, I don't know, it depends on what kind of practice you're doing and what are the instructions for how to accomplish that practice. So there are many different kinds of practices and different ways of dealing with the mind. But so in some sense, I don't know if, you start off saying neutral, a neutral state of mind. My understanding, at least in the Tibetan tradition, is we are trying to cultivate virtuous states of mind. We're trying to keep our mind in a virtuous state as much as we possibly can. And a neutral state of mind isn't bad. It's better than a negative state of mind. But on the other hand, it's karmically, in terms of what will be the karmic result of a neutral state of mind, it's not really going to help us very much. The reason we want to cultivate virtuous states of mind and have those as much as we can is because of the result. The result of virtuous states of mind is more and more virtuous states of mind, and then eventually realizations, but also in terms of rebirth. A big part of Buddhist practice is to ensure that we're creating the cause in our next life. When this life ends, our mind will continue. We want to make sure that it's going to go to a good place. Yeah, we want to go to a place where we can again meet spiritual teachers and have the conditions to practice, continue following the path, and to be able to have that kind of situation in our next life, we need to create a lot of virtue. Otherwise, if we're just cultivating neutral states of mind, maybe we'll find ourselves in a neutral situation, not necessarily conducive to continuing our spiritual practice. Yeah. So I don't know if that's answering your question or not.
Well, I think it flows from, like, if your motivation is to develop the conditions and the qualities for full enlightenment, there doesn't seem to be time for or benefit to neutrality. You need to be actively developing either skill or, you know what I mean? And in like calm abiding, it's still beneficial to have that introspective awareness, but the overall motivation and aim is full enlightenment. And so you need to be doing it kind of with a beneficial state of mind, I guess, is kind of what I was trying to parse out.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Thank you.
yeah, I mean, this is how things are explained in this tradition, the one I've been following, the Tibetan tradition, and specifically the Gelugpa tradition. You might find in other traditions that there isn't as much emphasis on always trying to create virtuous states of mind. I can't really say because I haven't gone deeply into other traditions of Buddhism. But yeah, it's like every thought we have, every state of mind we have does leave an imprint on our mind, and it will bring about results in the future. So what kind of results do we want? What kind of experiences do we want? What kind of life do we want to create for ourselves in the future? And that's not just in our future life, but also in this life. You know, we are the creators of our own experiences. We are the ones who are responsible for our experiences, what we encounter, how we feel, how we think, what happens to us. So we are the creators of that. So then we need to look into, okay, what kind of experiences do I want to have? What kind of life do I want to have? What kind of mind do I want to have? What kind of body do I want to have? So what do I want for myself in the future? And then what are the causes for that? Okay. So that's where this is coming from. Yeah, it's like we are the creators. So if we want things to go well, we want to have good experiences, we want to be a good person in the future, we need to create the causes for that now.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, you know, I've been studying Buddhism for almost 48 years now, and it's vast and complex. And it takes, I mean, I've had lots of doubts, and I still have lots of doubts and questions. I'm still kind of working things out. But yeah, a lot of these things takes time. We need time to think about them, mull them over, you know, talk with people, get different points of view until we get more clear on what it means to practice. And also each person has their own individual needs. We can't just copy somebody else's way of practicing. That may not work for us. That may not be right for us. So we can try it out, but then we may need to, you know, make some adjustments. That doesn't, not quite me. So what is right for me? What is the right way for me to practice that I'm comfortable with and that feels right and works for me? So there's kind of a lot of little aspects, a lot of little facets when it comes to learning and practicing Buddhism. Um, so what another thing I was going to talk about was just so we do have these delusions or negative states of mind. I don't know, whatever you want to call them, disturbing emotions, afflictions. There's different names for them, but you can choose whatever term you prefer. I like the word delusion. Um, so we have these in our mind, and even when we are trying to follow a spiritual path, we're trying to meditate, we're trying to be a good person, live a good life, and so on. But without choice, these delusions pop up in our mind, and so I'll talk about some ways of dealing with these uh, that are helpful. I have found them helpful. And there's also some ways that are not helpful. I'll talk about the unhelpful ones first because I have lots of experience in that. So, beating yourself up is not helpful. I've done a lot of that, and I know it's quite common, something many people do, not necessarily deliberately or consciously. It could be just a habit from before. Um, so many people, especially in the West, I think, have this problem of self criticism, even self hatred, uh, just feeling bad about oneself. And so it can happen then when anger comes up in your mind, or greed or jealousy or whatever, these kind of delusions pop up in the mind, that you react by feeling, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so horrible, what's wrong with me? I'm such a bad Buddhist. I'm trying to be a good Buddhist, but this is happening to me. I'm so bad. So that's like self-beating, self-flagellation, beating yourself up. Does anyone do that? That sound familiar? Yeah, I knew it. I still do it too. I mean, I don't choose to do it. It's just a habit that's very hard to break. So at least we need to know that that isn't the way to go. That doesn't help. It actually makes things worse. It just creates more turmoil in your mind. And what's behind that kind of habit is anger. It's like you're angry at yourself, critical of yourself. And that's a negative state of mind. So you're turning that negative state of mind against yourself. And if you indulge in that habit, you're increasing that negative state of mind. And so it's important to recognize that is not something we want to continue. It's not easy to stop, but at least be aware of it. At least try to notice when it's happening and back away from it. No, that's not what I want to do. That's not helpful. And this is, like I say, it's hard to stop that. And it's important to have compassion. We'll talk more about this when we get to love and compassion. But just as it's important to have love and compassion for others, we need to have love and compassion for ourselves. We too are a person, a being who deserves love and compassion. The Buddha has love and compassion for us. He doesn't feel angry and disgusted when we have delusions in our mind. He loves us. He forgives us. He just wants to help us. And so we need to find ways of turning our mind around so that instead of hating ourselves and beating ourselves up, we have forgiveness, kindness, patience, compassion for ourselves. So that's a process, a learning thing, but at least work on that. And and a few ways, techniques that help with that, things that I have found helpful. There's an analogy in the Buddhist teachings about how the mind is like the sky, and the real nature of our mind is like the sky. When the sky is completely clear, free of clouds and pollution, it's like when you go up in an airplane, 35,000 feet or whatever, and up there's no clouds, there's no pollution, it's just vast and clear and pure space. So our mind is similar to that in the sense that, like our thoughts and our emotions, our delusions, and so on, are not permanent parts of our mind. They are like the clouds that come and go, or the pollution that comes and goes, but isn't a fixed, permanent part of our mind. So that analogy of our mind being like the sky, and then our thoughts and our delusions or disturbing emotions being like clouds, that's really helpful, just to get a sense that delusions are not a permanent part of me. They come and go. And we can see that ourselves. You know, one moment you're angry, but then later it's not there anymore. It's gone. So it's not something permanent, not something fixed. So we shouldn't like hold on to it and identify with it. That is me, and I'm such a terrible person because I have anger. But if you step back and look at the anger, you can see, well, I'm not always angry. Sometimes I get angry, but sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm very loving and patient and kind. Yeah. So the anger is just something that comes and goes, like a cloud in the sky. It's not a permanent, fixed part of me. So that way of thinking can be really helpful, to not take our delusions so seriously and identify with them. So instead, we should, instead of thinking when we get angry, you know, we tend to say, I am angry. It's like we are identifying with our anger, feeling that the anger is me and my anger. We are one thing. And that's not true. That's a mistake. We are not our anger, because there are times when our anger isn't there. We are there, but our anger isn't there. So that shows that anger and me are not one thing. Anger is just a temporary experience that passes through my mind. So that's actually very helpful. When you do notice anger in your mind, just say to yourself, anger is in my mind. Anger is in my mind, instead of I am angry. Don't identify with the anger. It's not you. It's just something that passes through your mind. So that's a helpful way of learning to not take delusion so seriously, and also decreasing the habit of beating yourself up, feeling bad about your delusions, because they are not who you are. And also recall times when you have the opposite experience, when you have love, when you have kindness, when you have compassion. So those are there too. Those are part of you. So one other thing that I'll mention before we stop, another method that can be helpful in dealing with our mind and the delusions in our mind is to realize you're not alone. It can sometimes happen that when a delusion like anger comes up, or some other painful experience like feeling depressed or feeling grief or feeling anxious, so this kind of painful state of mind happens, and there can be the tendency to feel as if I'm the only person in the world who feels this way. I'm the only one who has this kind of problem. I mean, we may not think that deliberately or consciously, but it may just be more of a feeling, a sense of being isolated and alone in our suffering, in our pain, this painful experience. And if we see it that way, for one thing, it's not true. Okay, it's completely rubbish. It's ridiculous. You're not the only person in the world who feels that way. There's millions of other people who have the same problem, who get angry, who get depressed, who get anxious, whatever the experience is. It's definite that there are other people who have that experience too, maybe even at the same moment that you do. That very same moment that you are feeling that way, there could be thousands or even millions of other people in the world who feel that way too. So you're not alone. And that can help, because then you don't feel alone and cut off and separate from the rest of humanity, but you feel connected. You feel connected with other people. And this is an avenue for compassion. You can actually use this experience to open up your heart and feel compassion. You can say to yourself, I mean, initially it might be, just an intellectual exercise, but after doing it for a while, it really does open your heart. If I'm feeling depressed and I say to myself, there's lots of other people in the world who get depressed, and maybe even at this very moment are feeling depressed. And now I know how they feel. I know what it's like for those people. I know how painful it is. And I would really like to help them to be free of this painful experience of depression. And that can even energize you to think, I want to find a way to deal with depression, free myself from depression, so that I can help others, help them to deal with depression, be free of depression. So in this way, you're actually taking a painful experience that you're having and transforming it into something positive, something constructive. Even if it's only happening in your mind, but it helps you get out of that negative state of mind and gives you energy to do something positive, something constructive. And just having that thought, that wish, I would like to help others, even if you can't do it that very day or even that very year. But if you keep having that thought of, I want to help others, I want to help others to have less depression, you're creating the cause for that to happen. Maybe one day you will meet somebody who's depressed and asks you for help. And then you'll be able to help them with what you have learned from your experience. I remember one woman I met who said that when she went to her first Buddhist course, and she heard about the Four Noble Truths, the first noble truth, that there is suffering, and how every living being, every person has suffering. And she was like, really? I'm not the only one? Because up until then, this woman grew up in Spain. She's Spanish. And, I think in Spanish society, people tend to be very outgoing and cheerful. I think there's probably some expectation that you always need to be cheerful and friendly and look like you're happy. And so she said she suffered a lot from depression. She often felt depressed, but she felt she had to hide it. She had to hide it from other people and put on this face, this smiling, happy, joyful face to fit in with everybody else. So she said it was such a surprise to find out other people are unhappy too. Other people experience depression too. So that was a great relief for her. Great relief to find out that she wasn't alone. She wasn't the only person who experiences suffering. So that's something you could think about with your own personal suffering, whatever it may be, to just think, I'm not alone. There are other people who have this experience. And also, on top of that, there are some people who may have it even worse than me. I often get depressed. Not so much now, but in the past I did. But then I've heard stories about some people whose depression is so bad that they can't function. They're like, they can't even get out of bed. They can't do anything. They become almost catatonic, have to live in a mental hospital. So when I heard that, I thought, oh, wow, my depression is not nearly as bad as that. I can at least manage it. So that gave me some courage, I don't know what the word is, but a sense that I can do it. I can manage my depression. It's bad, it's painful, but it could be worse. And so when you see your own suffering in that perspective compared with the suffering of others, then your own suffering can seem smaller, less serious, and then more manageable. Comparing your problems with the problems of others will help your problems to appear not so bad. And then you'll feel, I can manage, I can deal with this one. It's not unbearable. It's not overwhelmingly huge and, oh, I can't. You know that expression, making a mountain out of a molehill. So that's what our mind does sometimes when we have a problem. Our mind can obsess about it and build it up, and it can become like a mountain, huge. And then we feel, oh, I'm crushed under the weight of this mountain. I can't deal with it. I can't bear it. But this exercise of thinking about the problems of others, what other people have to deal with in their life, can really help your problem to seem much smaller, more like a molehill. The Dalai Lama talks about this. He said one time he was in India and he got this terrible pain in his internal organs somewhere, and they had to take him to the hospital. And it was a long way. It was like a 2-hour drive to get to the hospital. And they were driving through small villages in the poorest part of India. And he said, looking out the window, he would see these little children in the street, dirty and raggedy and underfed, and he'd see old people just lying there on the ground, nobody looking after them. And he just felt so much compassion for these people and their suffering that he kind of forgot his own pain, his own suffering, his own pain just seemed very small, very minor. So that's like using compassion as a tool to deal with our own suffering. But it's also a way of building up our compassion, increasing our compassion. So we'll talk more about that in the coming talks. Actually, next week I'll talk about the first of the 4 immeasurables, which is love or loving kindness. Very, very beautiful. And then after that, we'll go on to compassion. So I was going to lead a meditation, but I ended up talking too much. But next week, definitely, we will. We won't just talk about loving kindness, but we'll do a meditation on it to see how we can cultivate it more. We have 2 minutes left. If there's any last questions someone would like to ask. Also, if you think of questions between now and next week, you could send them, I guess, email them to Patty, if that's okay with you, Patty. And then you can send them to me and I'll prepare an answer for the next time. There's the email address. In addition to questions, if there's some request that you may have, if you'd like me to talk about a particular issue that I didn't address, then you can ask for that as well. How to deal with boredom. I have experience with that too. Well, I guess we can end now. What we normally do at the end of a teaching or meditation is dedicate the positive energy. So we'll do it just with, just mentally, a little bit of reflection. So when we do an activity like this, like listening to teachings with a good motivation, we did try to generate a good motivation to begin with, then we're creating positive energy, what's normally called merit in Tibetan Buddhism. So this is like virtue, good karma. It's a cause of happiness and the cause of cultivating our spiritual potential. So it's a good thing to do. And so at the end of an activity like this, instead of just immediately jumping up and running off and doing the next thing, it's good to pause and reflect on what we've done and feel good about what we've done, a sense of joy. This was a good thing to do. I'm glad I spent my time doing this, listening to the Dharma with a good motivation. So have a sense of joy about that. And then also to share the merit, to share this positive potential with other people, other beings. So we make a kind of dedication, like a prayer. By this positive energy, may all other people and all other beings everywhere have happiness and be free of suffering. And may they meet the spiritual teachings that will enable them to transform themselves, to bring about a transformation of their mind so they're free of all the negative states of mind that bring suffering and problems, and they cultivate all the positive states of mind that enable their mind to grow higher, attain realizations of the path, and eventually attain enlightenment, awakening. Thank you for joining me. Hope it has been beneficial. See you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you
very
so
much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So helpful.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.